Abusive cycle. The abusive cycle describes the characteristic rotation between destructive and constructive behavior that typically exists in dysfunctional relationships and dysfunctional families. Alienation. Alienation means interfering or cutting a person off from relationships with others. This can be done by manipulating the attitudes and behaviors of the victim or of the people with whom they come in contact. The victim's relationships with others may be sabotaged through verbal pressure, threats, diversions, distortion campaigns and systems of rewards and punishments. Always and never statements. Always and never statements are declarations containing the words always or never. They are commonly used but rarely true. Anger. People who suffer from personality disorders often feel a sense of unresolved anger and a heightened or exaggerated perception that they have been wronged, invalidated, neglected or abused. In objective terms, this can be exaggerated or justified. Their significant others, friends and family members can also become angry. Avoidance. Avoidance is the practice of withdrawing from relationships with other people as a defensive measure to reduce the risk of rejection. Accountability. Criticism or exposure. Baiting and picking fights. Baiting and picking fights is the practice of generating a provocative action or statement for the purpose of obtaining an angry, aggressive or emotional response from another person. Belittling. Condescending and patronizing. Belittling, condescending and patronizing speech is a passive-aggressive approach to giving someone a verbal put-down while maintaining a facade of reasonableness or friendliness. Blaming. Blaming is the practice of identifying a person or people who is actually or allegedly responsible for creating a problem, rather than identifying constructive ways of dealing with the problem. Bullying. Bullying is any systematic action of hurting a person from a position of relative physical, social, economic or emotional strength. Catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is the habit of automatically assuming a worst-case scenario and inappropriately characterizing minor or moderate problems or issues as catastrophic events. Chaos manufacture. Chaos manufacture is the practice of unnecessarily creating or maintaining an environment of risk, destruction, confusion or mess. Also see sabotage. Cheating. Cheating is sharing a romantic or intimate relationship with somebody when you are already committed to a monogamous relationship with someone else. Cheating can be at least emotional, symbolic, and/or involve physical sexual contact. Chronic broken promises. Repeatedly making and then breaking commitments and promises is a common trait among people who suffer from personality disorders. Circular conversations. Circular conversations are arguments which go on almost endlessly, repeating the same patterns with no real resolution. Also see manipulation. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological term for the discomfort that most people feel when they encounter information which contradicts their existing set of beliefs or values. People who suffer from personality disorders often experience cognitive dissonance when they are confronted with evidence that their actions have hurt others or have contradicted their stated morals. Also see confirmation bias. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to pay more attention to things which reinforce your beliefs than to things which contradict them. Also see cognitive dissonance. Control me syndrome. Control me syndrome describes a tendency that some people have to foster relationships with people who have a controlling, narcissistic, antisocial or acting out nature. Cruelty to animals. Acts of cruelty to animals have been statistically discovered to occur more often in people who suffer from personality disorders than in the general population. In some cases of antisocial personality disorder, cruelty to animals is a self-teaching precursor to future cruelty to human beings. Denial. Denial is the practice of believing or imagining that some painful or traumatic circumstance, event or memory does not exist or did not happen. Dependency. Dependency is an inappropriate and chronic reliance by an adult individual on another individual for their health, subsistence, decision-making or personal and emotional well-being. Depression. When you feel sadder than you think you should, for longer than you think you should, but still can't seem to break out of it, that's depression. People who suffer from personality disorders are often also diagnosed with depression resulting from mistreatment at the hands of others, low self-worth and the results of their own poor choices. Dissociation. Dissociation is a psychological term used to describe a mental departure from reality. Wikipedia further explains that it is often experienced as a wide array of experiences, from mild detachment from immediate surroundings to more severe detachment from physical and emotional experience. It is commonly displayed on a continuum. The major characteristic of all dissociative phenomena involves a detachment from reality rather than a loss of reality, as in psychosis. In mild cases, dissociation can be regarded as a coping mechanism or defense mechanisms in seeking to master, minimize or tolerate stress, including boredom or conflict. At the non-pathological end of the continuum, dissociation describes common events such as daydreaming while driving a vehicle. Further along the continuum are non-pathological altered states of consciousness. More pathological dissociation involves dissociative disorders, including dissociative fugue and depersonalization disorder with or without alterations in personal identity or sense of self. These alterations can include a sense that self or the world is unreal, depersonalization and derealization, a loss of memory, amnesia, forgetting identity or assuming a new self, fugue, and fragmentation of identity or self into separate streams of consciousness. Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer is a method of gaining an advantage over perceived rivals by manipulating them into conflicts with each other. Domestic theft. Domestic theft is consuming or taking control of a resource or asset belonging to, or shared with, a family member, partner or spouse without first obtaining their approval. Emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is any pattern of behavior directed at one individual by another which promotes in them a destructive sense of fear, obligation or guilt. Fog. Emotional blackmail. Emotional blackmail describes the use of a system of threats and punishments on a person by someone close to them in an attempt to control their behaviors. Engulfment. Engulfment is an unhealthy and overwhelming level of attention and dependency on a spouse, partner or family member, which comes from imagining or believing that one exists only within the context of that relationship. Entitlement. Entitlement or a sense of entitlement is an unrealistic, unmerited or inappropriate expectation of favorable living conditions and favorable treatment at the hands of others. Escape to fantasy. Escape to fantasy is sometimes practiced by people who present a facade to friends, partners and family members. Their true identity and feelings are commonly expressed privately in an alternate fantasy world.